2AToday is back, everyone, and we're bringing you a very special series of shows on all things NFA. That's the National Firearms Act. We're talking suppressors, short-barreled rifles and shotties, and of course, NFA history. We've got some amazing experts joining us on this journey, and you're going to love it. But before we get started with that, I want you to know about 2AToday's brother podcast, AK-Today. The podcast for the U.S. collector of the automatic Kalashnikov rifle. We're talking AKs, man. If you're into that, or if you just like a good gun talk radio show, you're going to love it. You can catch AK-Today the same places you catch 2AToday. iTunes and TuneIn Radio. Just search the letter A, the letter K, the letter T, and O-Day, all together for AK-Today. Check it out. Right now, let's get the NFA series started. The fight for freedom continues. This is 2AToday.
The right of the people.
The right of the people.
The right of the people.
Shall not be infringed.
The right of the people.
To keep and bear.
The right of the people.
Shall not be infringed.
The right of the people.
Shall not
Be infringed. Welcome to episode 32 of 2AToday. It's March 11th, 2015, and I'm your host, YaDaddy. Coming to you from Marietta, Georgia this time. We're on the road a bit here, just north of Glocktown, USA. I'm actually in the conference room of a law office. And no, I'm not in trouble. We're here for a very specific reason for this beginning to a very special series of shows. And joining me via Skype to help out with this first show in the series is Kevin. Kevin, how's it going there in the natural state of Arkansas?
Well, it's going really great. Legislatively, we have a lot of good things happening here.
Yeah, I've heard about some of that. You got some really awesome things moving there. And you would think that Arkansas really wasn't a state we'd want to worry about, but you guys actually have some issues you need to resolve. Is that right?
Yes, there are some things that need to be fixed, and the legislature is busy getting those things taken care of, mostly having to do with prohibitions on places. And they're lifting a lot of those prohibitions.
All right. Well, some of you may remember, Kevin, from the original 2AToday 1.0 that we did live at Adventure Outdoors. Peter Gould, my usual co-host, is busy filming, and Kevin was gracious enough to step in and take his place. Thank you so much for joining us, Kevin.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, this is what we're doing tonight, folks. We're beginning a series of shows on NFA. That's the National Firearms Act. Some people may hear those three letters referred to quite often when it comes to getting a certain toy that you would like to have that's maybe a little too much fun for the government. And there's a lot of stuff around making that happen. I myself am in this process of acquiring an NFA item. And as I was going through this process, I decided this has got to be a show. And it's something that I'm very passionate about as I began to get into the process and learn more about what was going on and everything that's wrapped up around this. For this episode, we're just going to deal with the facts, though. We're going to talk about what it takes to go through the NFA process to get an NFA item. And joining me to help us with this is Dean Phillips, an attorney partner with Nicholson Phillips Law Firm. How's it going tonight, Dean?
It's going well. It's good to be here. Look forward to doing the first episode with you.
Excellent. And tell the folks a little bit about yourself, Dean. Why are you the person to do this show for us?
So I went to law school at Cumberland School of Law, came out and very quickly made partner with Nicholson Phillips. I own the firm along with Alan Nicholson. I have gotten into NFA trust law and actually firearms law in general based on my love for firearms. I began shooting when I was 3 years old. Been shooting for many, many years. And I got into NFA weapons, short barrel rifles, suppressors, when I was in law school. So I very, very quickly picked up this type of law. I'm actually about to be an FFL myself.
Oh.
A federal firearms license dealer will be manufacturing as well. And so we've dabbled in all aspects. I used to shoot competitively, so this is something I enjoy doing every day.
Kevin, I think I got a winner here. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, you're perfect. I had no idea you were doing the FFL thing. That's perfect. Absolutely. Well, listen, let's dig into this subject because we got a lot of stuff to cover. This whole thing basically began with me realizing that I had a need. I needed something. I needed a powerful weapon that would easily move around corners in my house and potentially wouldn't blow my ears completely away if I needed to pull the trigger in a desperate situation, like a home invasion. And I started to look at this issue and I decided, I need a short-barreled rifle. I need something that spits out a 30 caliber round and is short enough that I can easily move it around corners, and it has a buttstock on it. Well, when you get into that world, I realized very quickly there's some alphabet folks that care about that a whole lot, namely the ATF, that govern this whole category of firearms that I suddenly became interested in and suddenly felt like I had a need for it. Now, there may be people out there that say, oh, well, you don't need a gun like that. You can just use a handgun. Well, yeah, I could just use a handgun, but guess what? I looked at the situation and I decided that this is what I need. I need a short-barreled rifle, and I need a suppressor on the end of it. I need to be able to defend my family in my home using a powerful weapon to stop an assailant, and I want to survive with my hearing. So I decided I needed this, but I ran into some pretty serious things when I started looking into it. Before we get into those things, Dean, let's actually talk about what is an SBR as the government categorizes it.
Okay, an SBR, short barrel rifle as the government categorizes it, is a rifle with a barrel less than 16 inches. So if you want a AR-15 with a barrel shorter than 16 inches so you can maneuver around your house, or if you just want one because you like them, because they look cool and they're fun, you have to go through a special application process.
And the suppressor, what's the deal with the suppressor as far as the government's concerned? Is there a line you cross for a suppressor, or is it just suppressors, period, that they have a problem with?
Suppressors, period. Anything you can put on the end of the firearm that would suppress the noise that comes out of the end of the barrel. So whether that's something you make from, for example, a small tube that suppresses it, that makes it quieter, that's a suppressor.
Or an oil can?
Oil can, correct.
Yeah. Now, people refer to these things as silencers a lot, and they're not really silencers, are they?
No, well, they're not silent, is why we've technically changed the name. They aren't like what you see on the movies. They do have a sound signature, so the industry calls them suppressors.
Yeah, because if you've ever cycled the action of your firearm, you'll know it's pretty loud. Even if you completely suppress the blast of the charge coming out, it still makes some noise. And suppressors generally bring the sound down to a tolerable level, doesn't make it completely quiet at all. Is that right?
That's correct. The goal of the industry is to make, obviously, a quiet suppressor, but if they can make the suppressor hearing safe, then they've achieved their goal. So if we don't have to use earmuffs or cover our ears, then they have achieved the goal of suppressing the rifle.
All right. And I talked a little bit about why I wanted an SBR and why I want a suppressor on the end of it, but can you give me some other advantages to these two particular items?
Well, a short barrel rifle, like you were talking about, it's easy maneuverability. They're a lot of fun. It's not a large gun that you have to carry around and use on the range. Suppressors are fun. It's not as loud. Recoil is significantly reduced with a suppressor. So if you have a smaller child or a wife, or many females really enjoy suppressors because there's not much recoil, whether that's a pistol or whether that's a rifle. It's much more pleasurable to shoot. And like we said, they're still relatively loud, but you've got all these advantages.
Even if I didn't desire a short-barreled rifle for home defense, it would still just be a great gun to have. It'd be fun, collectible gun. It would be something that I could use as they call it a truck gun, something I could easily wield from inside of a car if I needed to defend myself. Suppressors becoming common in hunting. So if you're using a suppressor while you're hunting, then, you're not scaring game away. You're not bumming out somebody else's hunting trip, a mile away. So yeah, there's more to this than just the desire to defend yourself. There are a lot of reasons to have an SBR or have a suppressor just because you like it. Would you agree, Dean?
I absolutely agree. And like you were talking about, we like them, we enjoy them, they're fun, but they also help us protect our homes.
Absolutely.
I heard one of you mention oil filters a few minutes ago. I've seen people screw oil filters to the muzzle of their gun. And are you saying that they need a special license to do that?
They would need what's called a tax stamp. So they would have to apply with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to be able to have a device that allows a oil can to be screwed onto the end of the barrel.
So basically, by coming up with this hack, using a very inexpensive item that you get off the shelf of your automotive supply store, they have manufactured an NFA item. Is that right?
They have not manufactured it per se, but if they want the device that would allow them to put a oil can onto their barrel to use it as a suppressor, then they must properly register that.
Oh, so it's not the oil can, it's the thing that attaches it to the barrel that's the problem.
That is correct, in that instance. So it's kind of a little bit of a different situation than a regular suppressor you might see at a gun dealer.
Okay.
It's very confusing because I have wondered if the people I've seen doing this have gotten a tax stamp for it.
You're seeing people do this?
Yes, I've seen people do this.
Okay, all right.
And if they don't have a tax stamp, then are they breaking the law?
Unfortunately, they are. They would be breaking the law, and that would be a mandatory prison term of 1 to 10 years, unfortunately, with up to a $100,000 fine.
Ouch.
So this is serious business.
It is very serious business.
That's a perfect segue into NFA and what is it? Let's dig into the nuts and bolts of what getting an NFA item is all about. Dean, talk to me about the hoops I've got to jump through to make this happen. I've decided I'm going to start with an SBR. I'm eventually going to get a suppressor for it, but right now I'm just dealing with getting a short-barreled rifle. From that desire, what is the next step I have to take?
Okay, so the next step you have to take is you have to decide, do I want to purchase a short barrel rifle from a dealer, or do I want to make a short barrel rifle? And by make a short barrel rifle, I mean, do I have a lower receiver that I want to put a short barrel upper on? So a upper that is less than 16 inches in length. So you tell me which process you'd like to go through first, and we'll walk you through it.
All right. Well, myself, years ago, I bought a parts kit for a Yugoslavian M92. This is a really cool AK, and it's got a short barrel on it. It's about 10 inches. Awesome gun. And I got that kit, and I bought the receiver for it. And I've reached the point now where I want to make that a real gun, send it to a competent gunsmith, and I'm going to have that turned into a real gun that's a short-barreled rifle. So what do I do? Okay.
Well, I actually have an M92 myself. So
they
are.
Is it an underfolder?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Underfolder.
I'm sorry.
So what you would do is you would need to first set up a gun trust. So whether that's go to a local lawyer or get onto my website, contact me, you need to get a gun trust. So what we do is we do everything online. So you would get online, fill out the information about a gun trust, submit your application, and then my firm would turn around and send you a gun trust within 1 business day. So tomorrow you could have a gun trust. You could take 2 witnesses down to a notary, execute the trust, and you now have a gun trust that's in full force and effect. You don't have to register a gun trust. You don't have to send a copy to me or to a clerk. It's just executed. It's there. It's similar to a contract or to a will. It's just a legal document that's now executed.
What's the difference in a trust and a will?
All right, so a will tells your estate exactly what to do upon your death. So it's a document that provides all the information necessary for an executor to disperse your estate. And the difference between a will and a trust is that a trust is a completely separate legal entity. It's not your estate, it's not your property, it's the trust's property. So you are going to register these NFA weapons with the ATF under a trust instead of yourself individually.
Yeah, and that is a choice. I could do this as an individual, right? I could send in a form to the ATF where I am attaching it to myself as an individual. Is that right?
Yes, you absolutely could. You do not have to use the trust route.
Okay. What's the advantage to the trust over filing as an individual?
Well, there's many, many advantages. And I get this question every single day from almost every client we deal with. The advantage of a trust is that you do not have to get a chief law enforcement officer to sign a piece of paper saying that you can lawfully own a short barrel rifle. You do not have to send fingerprints along with your application, and you do not have to send a picture of yourself along with the application.
So that's the rub right there. If you file as an individual, you got to get okayed by the chief law enforcement officer. And it's my understanding, Dean, that not every one of those Clio, as we call them, wants to be a part of this. Is that right?
That's correct. For some reason, they see some sort of legal liability with allowing people to have short barrel rifles, suppressors. So a lot of them don't. And depending on their political leanings, they may not believe in these types of weapons being held by the average citizen. So a lot of them will not. Now, those who do, the other issue is that chief law enforcement officers are very, very busy, so it may take them 2 or 3 or 6 weeks. I've even heard of chief law enforcement officers taking 3 or 4 months to sign off on an approval to get a short barrel rifle.
Well, now, we're in Georgia, which is a pretty darn gun-friendly state, and Kevin is in Arkansas, which is a pretty darn gun-friendly state. And in your experience, Dean, with Clios in these types of gun-friendly states, how receptive are they? Is it just completely out of the question that I'm going to get one from a Clio, or is it just kind of luck of the draw?
Here in Georgia and in Arkansas, Texas, Florida, and many other
American states.
Yeah, American states. The chief law enforcement officers, the vast majority of them do not have a problem signing off. But there are several counties in Texas and Georgia and in Florida where the chief law enforcement officer does refuse to sign off on these. And you're then left with the trust route.
So if I'm in, let's say Baltimore, Maryland, it's just not going to happen, right?
I do have some clients in Baltimore, and I would certainly expect that's why, because they need a trust, because they have no other avenue.
Yeah, so trust really seems to be the most practical way to go at this point.
The most practical, and there's also several other reasons. Anyone listed as a co-trustee in your trust, so essentially any other co-manager in the trust, can also possess the NFA weapons, so they could also possess that short barrel rifle as long as they're at least 18 years old, and they can lawfully possess a firearm. They can. And also, you're not going to run into any problems with your estate once you start getting a little older. So many of us will need to go into assisted living, and we'll need to pass on our firearms before that time because we just aren't mentally there to possess firearms. Well, if you don't have a trust, then those firearms have to go back either to the ATF or to local law enforcement. That's a huge issue.
You mean I can't take my Yugo M92 to the old folks' home?
You know, if you can find an old folks' home that would allow you to have a Yugo M92, then sign me up ahead of time.
Because I saw myself on like the porch, just in a rocking chair, just plinking away. I mean, that sound's probably not going to be a big deal anyway, but Kevin, you got something?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Clio, that would normally be the county sheriff. Is that what you said?
The county sheriff is generally the only CLEO, Chief Law Enforcement Officer, that the ATF will accept. You could get the district attorney to also sign, but there are not many district attorneys out there who will sign a document like this.
Yeah, it's like a hot potato for these folks.
Yeah.
They really don't want to bother with it. So,
What if I already have a trust?
What kind of trust?
Like a revocable trust that contains all my personal property? Does it need to be a separate gun trust?
It does need to be a separate trust. And the reason I say that is because each trust is drafted for a specific purpose. So whether it's a family living trust or whether it's a trust to hold assets like your home and your car and possibly investment accounts, they're each drafted for those purposes. And just like that, a gun trust is drafted specifically for firearms.
Okay.
So there's different provisions in that trust, such as the co-trustees being able to possess the firearms, but not able to buy and sell the firearms, which are very, very critical in a gun trust. So you do not want to register your NFA weapons into your regular family trust.
Okay.
all right, yeah, so a gun trust is what you're looking for here. For me personally, I decided to go with the gun trust made specifically for this purpose. And it was simple, it was quick. I highly recommend it as the way to do things. Let's talk about how we actually set this trust up. So I did a little shopping, did my web research, and I started poking around, trying to figure out what's the best way to do this, which way do I want to go. And I found lots of ways to make this happen, make a trust happen. But every time I got into it, questions kept popping up in my mind. And through this entire NFA process for me, it's been nothing but questions. Every time I hit something, I went, oh, but what about this? What about that? What does this mean? What am I supposed to do there? It was nerve-wracking. And I eventually went, I need a professional. I need somebody that knows how to do this. And I actually contacted Dean here to set up my trust. And tell us about your process for setting up a trust for someone like me that just wants an SBR.
Sure. We do a lot of NFA trusts, thousands every year, so we've simplified the process. What you would do is you would log on to my website at www.nfalawyers.com. NFAlawyers.com. And you'll see that there's an online application there, and that application asks you some pretty basic questions. What's your full name? What's your address? What county do you live in? And who do you want to list as co-trustees? Like we were talking about earlier, those are the people that can possess the NFA weapons in the trust, as long as they're of age and they are lawfully able to possess a firearm. And then you'll list beneficiaries. Those are the people that will be able to receive the trust property when you pass away. And that's all the information I need. And the reason I don't need anything else and don't put anything else, I don't want anything else, is because I don't want the ATF knowing more about you than they have to. So we put the bare minimum about your personal information in there. So it takes 4 or 5 minutes to fill that out. And then the payment is all online. We charge $125 for gun trusts.
Which is a deal.
Oh, it is. That's what I was thinking. That's not very much at all.
So once we get that, so 5 minutes of you filling out an application, I will draft a gun trust. And of course, we review the information you submitted to make sure it will create a valid trust, and I personally draft them. So I will draft those gun trusts, call you if you have any questions, and also you are welcome to call me at any time with questions. A lot of clients have questions like you were talking about when you're staring at 1 to 10 years and $100,000 worth of fines.
Oh, yeah.
You need your questions answered.
Absolutely. And even as simple as your process was on the web, as I was doing it, I still was going, I still had questions. It's nerve-wracking. I got to tell you, this whole NFA process I've just found to be nerve-wracking. And your process really set my mind at ease about a lot of that. But I still had some questions, and I called you up, and the man answered the questions. He was there for me, absolutely. And one other thing I want to ask you, Dean, is how state-specific are these gun trusts?
The gun trusts actually are more federally specific than state-specific. So since the National Firearms Act is federal law, and that federal law controls most of these firearms, if not all of these firearms, then we actually have to draft this more for federal law, and we leave state law open-ended. So meaning that the trust can perform all lawful activities under the state, but we have to specify certain activities for federal purposes.
So let's say Kevin, and I don't know, let's say Arkansas, decides he wants to set up a gun trust with your help. Is there going to be anything specific about one for Arkansas over Georgia?
There's nothing more specific for Arkansas than there is for Georgia, other than the fact that the trust is set up as a Arkansas entity and it's governed by Arkansas law, whereas the Georgia trust is obviously a Georgia entity governed by Georgia law.
Okay. So I think we've discovered here that gun trust is definitely the way to go. Mm-hmm. There are many ways to make a gun trust happen. I've looked at all of them, and when it came right down to it, I decided let's spend the money and let's get something that I know is good with a professional behind it, and I was very pleased with what happened.
And while we're on all the benefits of a gun trust, I think we forgot to mention the fact that this can speed up the process more than just the chief law enforcement officer sign off. Oh, yeah. So when you make a NFA weapon, so if you are making a short barrel rifle from a lower receiver like we were talking about, then the process is actually several months faster because you can file the paperwork online.
Oh, yeah.
So you're talking about taking a 5 or 6 month wait time if filed individually down to a 30 to 45 day wait time.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. The e-form process is definitely recommended. That's what I did myself. And with that in mind, now's a perfect time to talk about the actual ATF forms. So for whichever method you took, you've ended up with your trust, and now it's time to do something with it. I could mail it in, and I'm looking at a minimum of right now, and this changes with the weather, folks. I'm looking right now at a minimum of 5, 6, 7 months to get something like that back. Those times will vary. I've heard of as long as a year. Have you not, Dean?
Oh, absolutely. 2 years ago, I believe with a suppressor and a short barrel rifle, I waited 13, almost 14 months.
Jeez.
Wow.
Good thing you didn't need it right away, or did you?
I wanted it right away.
I definitely want it, and you should be able to have it. So yeah, you could mail this in, but that is going to take a long time, even in the best case scenario. I think the ATF, if I'm not mistaken, they've hired some new folks and brought that time down. Is that right?
That's correct. We understand that they have hired 12 individuals to approve applications, which has brought the wait time down from that 12 to 13 months to 5 to 6 months.
So you'd say 12 people. How many were there before the 12 were hired?
I believe there were 6. Don't hold me to that.
Oh, God. Okay, well, there you go, people. So, yeah, that's why right there. So you could mail it in, but I chose the e-form process. And before I can go do the e-form process at the ATF's website, I got one more step, right? I got to take that gun trust and I got to get it notarized.
Yes, and you actually have 2 steps. So one, what you'll do is you will pull up the Schedule A, or what's called the assignment of property, that I will provide to you on your computer. So I'll give it to you in a Word document. And what that Schedule A is it's a sheet of paper that lists all the property located in the trust. So you will actually add your lower receiver information to that Schedule A. So you're granting that property, that lower receiver, to your trust. So like we were talking about earlier, the trust is making that short barrel rifle rather than the individual. So you add that to your Schedule A, just type it on there, print it out, very simple. And then you take 2 witnesses down to a notary, like at a local UPS store or FedEx Kinko's, and you'll all sign the trust and they will notarize it. And then you'll all 3 sign the Schedule A. That one does not need notarized.
So what I did, Dean, was I took the gun trust you made for me and I did all the filling out part. I got it all ready. I got it copied. And I went to my bank. I went to my local bank. I went there and they actually do notarization for free, as it turns out, as a benefit for their customers. And I went there and saw their notary. They have a notary on staff. And I actually had witnesses that worked in the bank sign for me. I didn't necessarily know them, but they witnessed that I signed it. Is that okay?
That is certainly okay. Any notary will do. I just generally suggest a UPS store or FedEx Kinko's because they are the easiest to deal with. A lot of banks cause problems when people bring in documents about firearms. They do not want to notarize those documents. They don't know what they are. They don't know what they're signing off on. But tends to show that the UPS store and FedEx Kinko's just does their job and notarizes the documents without asking questions.
Yeah, I actually talked to my local UPS store before I went and did this, and they were just going to charge a few dollars, and they had a couple of folks there that could act as witnesses. I needed a call ahead for that because I couldn't count on it. But when you think about having to drag two friends down to the UPS store, it may or may not necessarily go down that way, but you do need to check ahead and see if they have people at the UPS store or at your bank who can act as witnesses. My bank evidently doesn't care about it being a gun trust because they didn't say a word. I was kind of sweating that for a little bit, thinking, are they going to say something about this? But he didn't care. He was a nice guy. He just made it happen. I was in and out in like 20 minutes.
And I get a lot of questions, and they're generally asking who can act as a witness. Well, that's anyone at least the age of majority here in Georgia, so at least 18 years old. If you're not located in Georgia, then it must be anyone the age of majority, whether that's 18 or 19 years old, and those persons must not be beneficiaries in the trust. So they can be friends, family, some guy you bump into in line at the UPS store, but they cannot be beneficiaries of the trust.
Oh, okay.
Suppose I want a suppressor. I cannot take possession of the suppressor. So how can I enter the serial number of that suppressor in the trust if I don't have possession of it yet?
Okay. Well, we are actually on a Form 1 transfer. So we are building a short barrel rifle. The Form 4 transfer, so if you are buying from a dealer, is a different type of transfer. And in that case, you would actually add the suppressor to the gun trust once you get the approved tax stamp. So once the dealer calls you and says, hey, we got your tax stamp in the mail, that's when you can add it to your Schedule A and go pick it up, because at that point you can legally grant that suppressor to your trust.
In that case, how would having the trust be an advantage? Because I'm having to wait for the tax stamp.
You are still waiting the 5 to 6 months, but like we were talking about earlier, you don't have to get the chief law enforcement officer to sign off, which can take a few weeks. No fingerprints, no photo ID. Anyone listed as a co-trustee can also possess. You won't run into any problems with probate court or when you start getting older, like we were talking about. But then also we anticipate that those types of transfers, those Form 4 transfers when you're buying from a gun dealer, should be back up online here within the next 8 months or so by the end of the year, or at least we hope, we'll see. And at that point, then you can use the trust online and it will speed the process up to 30 to 45 days again. So the trust is still the way to go.
So gun shops that sell suppressors, they really kind of know how this works, and they make this pretty easy for folks, right?
They certainly do. If you bring them a copy of the trust documents and a $200 check made out to the ATF, they will fill out all the paperwork and send it in for you. It's very, very simple.
And the suppressor in that case will still be registered to the trust, not to me personally. Is that correct?
That is correct. The ATF will register that suppressor to your trust, and when you get that tax stamp, you can grant it to the trust.
Okay, my taking the trust to the dealer that sells the suppressors, that cleared it up for me.
So we've been talking a lot about ATF forms, and we're going to deal with primarily 2 of those. Tell us about ATF Forms 1 and 4. What's the difference? Which one do I need for SBR? What about a suppressor?
Okay, so the ATF Form 1 is what we're currently talking about. So that is if you are making a NFA weapon, which is a short barrel rifle, a short barrel shotgun, or if you know how to make a suppressor, then a suppressor. You can absolutely make a suppressor. You just have to get approval to make those things. So the Form 1 is for making. The Form 4 is for purchasing from a dealer or an individual.
Oh, so it's not necessarily suppressor or SBR. It's the method I'm using. Is that right?
That is correct.
Ah, okay.
Okay, that's clear.
Yeah, so I did a Form 1, and I filed that online, and it's been about 30 days. I'm hoping to hear something anytime about that. The process that I went through was pretty clear. It was, as government websites go, it was pretty efficient. I didn't have too many questions, but I will tell folks that there are a ton of resources online for how to fill these things out, especially the e-form. I found several folks on YouTube that were giving tutorials about how to fill out the e-form. So if you have any questions, you can refer to those types of things. Do understand these people aren't lawyers. They'll tell you that also. But if you've got some questions about how to get through these processes, there are resources out there. But I found the e-form process pretty clear for the Form 1, and I managed to get that all taken care of. I sent in an electronic payment of $200, and that ball got rolling. Eventually, that's going to come to fruition, hopefully. And I will have my tax stamp, right? What is a tax stamp?
It is a literal stamp that comes on a form that shows that you paid your tax and you submitted your documents and you were approved, or your trust in this case would be approved, to make this short barrel rifle.
And do I have to have that tax stamp with me at all times?
You need a copy. And actually, if you file online, the ATF will just email the tax stamp to you. So you just save that to your computer, you print out a copy, and you always keep a copy of that tax stamp with the gun at all times.
Where does it go?
In your pocket, on your phone.
Stuff it in the handguard?
Yeah.
Hope it doesn't catch on fire?
Oh, so an electronic copy on your phone would suffice as well.
I would imagine. There's no case law out there to say what does constitute proper showing that you legally own these weapons, but I always keep a copy of on my phone and a paper copy just in case I forgot my paper copy somewhere.
I'm thinking I'm doing a triangle folder on this Yugo M92, and they're kind of hollowed out, so I could actually roll that up and stuff it in the triangle folder. That'll be perfect.
A lot of pistol grips have little compartments in them too.
Just check it out. Just whip it out. So I'm going to get this tax stamp, and then it's time for me to build my NFA item. Well, I'm not actually going to do that. Good Lord, I wish I had that kind of time. But I'm going to send my receiver, and I'm going to send my parts kit to a competent gunsmith. They're going to build that gun, and I imagine they need to see that tax stamp when I send it off. Is that right?
They probably want to see it to make sure that you lawfully do own that, and they're building something for you that will be lawful for you to own.
Okay. So I'm going to send all that fun stuff off. My pile of parts is going to get turned into a really cool AK, and it's going to come back to me. Anything special have to happen when this thing comes back to me?
Well, before you can take possession of it, it needs to be engraved. What will need to be engraved on the lower receiver, generally, is the trust name, the city, and the state that your trust is in. And the reason is because the ATF has said that they want to know where you have made that short barrel rifle.
Oh, okay. So if I'm at a gun range and someone in authority comes up and wants to inquire about my really cool gun, I'm going to need to show my tax stamp, and they're going to need to match that to what's engraved on the receiver, right?
That is correct.
So I guess I probably got to do that before I send this off to get it built, unless my gunsmith does engraving. Is that right?
That's correct. Before you build that short barrel rifle, it must be engraved.
Are there people that specialize in that?
There are. I deal with someone locally, Dobbs Defense out of Hiram, Georgia, and there's also a company in Ohio that I like that is called Orion Arms. And then if you certainly want to spend plenty of money and have a very, very good job done, then there's a company called Ident.
All right. But this can't be done like by your local jeweler, right? It's got to be somebody that knows what they're doing.
It should be someone that knows what they're doing because a certain depth must be engraved, 0.03, and that is not known by most engravers unless they do this for a living.
Ah, okay. And you need it to go in kind of a particular place. You don't want to just stick it anywhere, right?
You generally want it to go onto the lower receiver. And the reason I tell clients to always put it on the lower receiver, in the case of a short barrel rifle, an AR-15, you may want to put a different upper receiver on that gun. Well, if you put the engraving on the upper receiver or on the barrel, then you would have to engrave the next upper receiver or barrel. So always put it on the lower receiver. That way you don't have to keep engraving things. And what I usually do is put the engraving on the front of the magwell where some people put their hands because you can't see the engraving from either side of the gun.
Oh, yeah. And on the AKs, the folks like to stick them up in the trigger location, somewhere real out of the way so that it doesn't kind of mess up the look of the gun. You don't want your gun to look like Century Arms got a hold of it in an import and Billboard marked it. So you want to be very specific about how this is done and get it to someone that knows what they're doing.
Now, you mentioned the depth of the engraving. I assume that there's a height that's required as well, like a size, a font size, let's say.
There is a font height. I cannot recall what it is off the top of my head because I do not do engraving all day long.
But yeah, get it to a professional.
Yeah,
they'll know what they're doing.
They know.
And how much does that cost? Is this more money? More money for me?
Yeah, it's always more money.
Yeah.
You can find someone, I think Orion does it for as little as $40 if I remember correctly. Dobbs Defense locally. Call Brian Dobbs. He does real good work, and he'll usually do it with you standing there. And that way you can drop it off and wait 10 minutes and take it right back home. He may be a touch more expensive, but it is certainly worth your cost to be able to get it done that day and not have to ship your firearm back and forth.
Wow, I had no idea. Yeah, that's cool guys at Dobbs Defense. I've been to their shop before. And yeah, I didn't know they did it while you wait. That's great.
And one more point about engraving. I get a lot of questions from clients. Do I have to engrave my suppressor? Well, it's not, again, specific to the NFA weapon. If you are making a NFA weapon, you have to engrave your trust name, city, and state. If you're purchasing that suppressor or that short barrel rifle or that short barrel shotgun from a dealer, then you do not have to engrave anything.
All right. Cool. Well, we've been talking a lot about the short-barreled rifle situation. Let's dig into the suppressor thing because that's going to be my next step. So how is the suppressor process different? Kind of run us through that, Dean.
The suppressor process is actually easier. So once you have a copy of those executed trust documents, you take it down to your dealer, hand them a $200 check, purchase that suppressor, and they will send all your paperwork in. And then that's when you start your 5 to 6 month wait time. So when that 5 to 6 month wait time is over with, the ATF will have approved your tax stamp. They'll send that tax stamp to your gun dealer, and that is when you can add that suppressor to your assignment of property, the Schedule A we were talking about, and then go pick it up.
And when I pick it up, am I ready to go? Can I go to the gun range and pop it on there and, start enjoying it?
You sure can. When you go to pick it up, they're going to ask you to fill out the Form 4473 that you fill out with any firearm you purchase. So you'll fill that out. They'll make a copy of your license and your carry permit, and then you can walk out with your suppressor.
Now, my Yugo M92, when that's coming back from my competent gunsmith, is that going to have to go through a dealer to get transferred back to me?
They do not have to transfer it through your local gun shop. They can actually send it to you individually.
Wow. Freedom. That's awesome. Sort of. Had to go through a lot to get the freedom to have it sent to me. All right. Well, that's great. I've got my Yugo M92 now. I've enjoyed it at the range, but suddenly my company decides they want me to move to another state. I've been working for my company for a long time. I don't want to quit my job. So I'm going to move to this other state, or maybe I just want to move to another state. Maybe I want to move to a better gun state like Arizona or something like that. How are these NFA items going to affect that situation, Dean?
Okay, so let's say you are moving to Arizona where these NFA weapons are legal. So what you will do is you will apply to move, essentially. So you will send the ATF a Form 20. You can just Google it online, print it out. It's a free form you can send to them, and you're just notifying them that you are making a move. You are permanently changing the residence of those NFA weapons. And in the case of a short barrel rifle, a short barrel shotgun, or a machine gun, you actually have to get approval before you can transport those weapons across state lines. With a suppressor, you can cross state lines without receiving approval. But make sure you do not transport these NFA weapons through states that it's not lawful to have them.
Okay, so now I got kind of a boat anchor on my hands. Is that right? How difficult is this process?
It's really very simple. You know when you're going to move. It's 6 months out. I have to move. Okay, I just send the ATF a form letting them know that this is where I'm moving to.
So if I got to move in 3 months, what happens?
That's fine. The Form 20 generally takes about 1 month to complete. And let's say, for example, you have to move next week.
Yeah.
Well, then one of your co-trustees that is here in Georgia can just hang on to those NFA weapons until you get approval to take them to Arizona.
Oh, okay. All right. So not the end of the world, but that's kind of more regulation there I got to deal with. So hopefully that won't come up.
What if I just want to go to Arizona for the day and take my short barrel rifle?
You do have to get approval. You would have to file the Form 20, get approval to transport across state lines. So What I recommend to all my clients is at the beginning of the year, think about every state you might want to take that short barrel rifle to. Okay, I've got a hunting trip in Texas. All right, well, I'm going to plan a hunting trip sometime this year in Texas, so let's just go ahead and submit a Form 20 for Texas. Well, I've got family down in Florida. I'd like to take the guns down there and shoot in Florida. All right, so we're going to send one to Florida as well.
So you have to do this yearly?
I always do mine yearly so that I can pick up and go wherever I want to at any point.
Okay.
And the Form 20 is good for a year. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I recommend filling out the Form 20 for 11 months. So I fill mine out in January. I fill out another one at the beginning of December.
And on one form, you can list as many states as you want that you plan to visit?
I believe the form has a blank space for 4 different items, so you just send in 2 or 3 or 4 forms, however many you need.
I see.
All right, well, let's say, God forbid, that my company wants me to move to, I don't know, New York City. And I'm not going to be able to take my really cool Yugo M92. I actually might have to think about quitting my job at that point. But they want me to move to New York City, and Yugo M92 ain't going as a short-barreled rifle to New York City. So now I've got to sell it. What kind of issues come up when I need to sell my NFA item?
Well, the great thing about a trust is you actually don't have to sell it. You can actually let it stay at a co-trustee's house. So if you've got a Uncle John here in Georgia that wants to keep the NFA weapon while you're in New York, you can let him keep it. You just file that Form 20, letting the ATF know that it's going to Uncle John's house. But let's say you don't have an Uncle John, nobody wants them, and you just want to get rid of them. Well, what you would do is you would file a Form 4 showing that you are transferring the NFA weapon from your trust to either another trust or the buyer himself individually. That would, again, incur the $200 tax stamp because it's being transferred from you, the seller, to the buyer, and you'd have to wait your 6 months.
Yeah, so that gets a little sticky when it's time to sell a gun. I mean, what does that look like? I go and put an ad out to sell my Yugo M92. Somebody decides that they want to buy it. And then at that point, I've got to make sure that they've got what we need to make this happen, right?
That's true. They have to pay their $200. They have to wait 6 months. And then at the end of that 6 months, they got to hope that you're going to uphold your end of the deal. So
Wow.
What I always tell everybody is consider these things lifetime investments.
Oh, yeah.
They're kind of hard to get rid of. They're expensive to get rid of. And just leave them with a family member.
All right. So then another really good reason for a trust, folks. Now, this leads me to something that might, if I'm not mistaken, be a solution to this particular problem, and that is I hear a lot about pistols being turned into SBRs, and we see a lot of things coming into the country being imported legally as pistols and also being manufactured in the country as pistols, and it's literally a pistol legally. Because it was originally a pistol and I turned it into an SBR, do I have an advantage when it's time to sell it? Can I turn it back into a pistol, and would that make it easier to sell?
You could turn it back into a pistol, making it easier to sell. What you would do is you would request that the ATF not consider it a NFA weapon anymore. Then you could just sell it as a pistol.
So what does that process look like?
You would send the ATF a letter notifying them that you would like it to no longer be classified as a NFA weapon. And of course, you would have to take the butt stock off, and you would have to make it back into a pistol.
Dean, what about the engraving on the pistol? What was an SBR is now a pistol.
That would be left there. You don't need to re-engrave anything.
Okay. All right. So there you go. So that's why there's all these pistols, quote unquote pistols out there. All right. So that might be the way to go in the future with my next NFA item. Mm-hmm. And that leads me to one of the last things we're going to talk about here, and we would be remiss if we didn't talk about this, and that's the SIG brace. So the SB15, you've seen it in all your gun blogs. What's the deal with the SIG brace, Dean?
All right, so everybody knows that the SIG brace is some sort of brace or device that you wrap around your arm and you can shoot your pistol around your arm. Well, we were all doing that. We were all okay with that. And then the ATF said, all right, well, things are going well, so you can shoulder that. So instead of strapping it to your wrist, you can put it up to your shoulder and shoot it as a rifle. So we all started doing that, and everything was going fine and dandy. Well, then a new director of the ATF was appointed, and that director decided to change his mind. We can't do that any longer. We cannot shoulder that SIG brace. Well, now that defeats the purpose of the SIG brace. Mm-hmm. So since we can't shoulder it, well, we'll just turn it into a short barrel rifle so we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, so I think where this stands right now, it's totally legal to take your AR pistol or your AK pistol, affix a buffer tube of some sort to the back of it, and put on your SB15, and you have not changed that weapon into anything other than a pistol at that point. But if it touches your shoulder, suddenly you've manufactured an NFA item. Is that their attitude?
Yep, suddenly you've manufactured an NFA weapon, and you are again subject to that $1 to $10 or $100,000 if it is not registered. Cheapers. Just by putting it to your shoulder.
So I can wrap it around my arm the way it was originally designed, and I can actually put it on my chin. I can put the SB15 on my chin, can I not, and use it braced against my chin. Is that right?
I have not heard where that would be illegal, so we could only assume that it would be all right.
Yeah, that based on my research and what I've seen on YouTube, you can stick it on your chin. It can be a chin brace. It can be an arm brace. But if I slide that from my chin back about 5 inches and it touches my shoulder, then I'm a criminal.
Apparently so.
All right, so that's the deal with the SIG brace right now. You know, this show is being recorded in March of 2015, so if you're listening to this 5, 6, 7 months down the road or a year later, check what's going on with that at this time, because that's sometimes is a fluid situation, I hate to say. All right. So, Kevin, before we go, did you have anything else?
Yes, this is kind of off the main topic here, but it does have to do with NFA items. Suppose I have an AR pistol and it has a rail under the fore end. Would it be okay to put a vertical grip on that forward rail?
It is okay only if it is registered. So the pistol...
So it's not okay.
That's another one of those regulations. So no SIG brace to the shoulder and no vertical foregrip unless they are registered.
Yeah, so if I take a vertical foregrip and I stick it on my AR pistol, then I'm in trouble again, right?
You sure enough are.
Okay, good Lord.
And that falls in the category of other? Is that what that firearm is now? Other?
Possibly.
Yeah, it's not a rifle. It's
Okay.
it's kind of silly. Well, we're going to get more into that aspect of this whole NFA process. We're coming to the end, though. It's been a great hour you've spent with us, Dean. We've learned a lot, and I hope the audience has gotten a lot out of this. I know Kevin and I have.
Oh, certainly. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate you, Kevin and Dean, for joining me for this episode. Before we go, Dean, tell us about what you do. Give us the NFAlawyers.com.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I will certainly plug myself. Yeah. So you can check us out at NFAlawyers.com. That is my law firm's website for the NFA trust practice. We do NFA trusts for $125. You're welcome to call me if you have any questions. If you just want to talk about things, that is certainly okay. I know a lot of people do not want to spend their money without talking to me first. You can also check us out at NicholsonLawyers.com. That's my firm's website. My partner Alan does injury law. I do criminal defense, self-defense, and a lot of divorce and family law. So if there's any way we can help you, feel free to give us a call.
So we know how to get in touch with Dean for a gun trust, but if you want to get in touch with this show, 2A Today, you can reach us at 2ATodaypodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at 2A Today, or you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/2A Today. And as always, it's the number 2, the letter A, the letter T, and O-Day. That's how you spell 2A Today all together. But the easiest way to get the show is to subscribe to 2A Today on iTunes and leave a rave 5-star review. And we can also be found on TuneIn Radio for all the Android folks out there. All right, well, at the end of every show, we like to leave you, the listening audience, with some words of significance surrounding the Second Amendment. And this episode's 2A quote is going to be delivered by none other than Kevin. What you got for us, Kevin?
This quote is from Thomas Paine from his piece, Thoughts on Defensive War, that appeared in Pennsylvania Magazine in July of 1775. The supposed quietude of a good man allures the ruffian, while on the other hand, arms, like law, discourage and keep the invader and the plunderer in awe, and preserve order in the world as well as property.
So I want to preserve my property with a Yugo M92 short-barreled rifle with a triangle folding stock with a little piece of paper stuck inside it.
That should do it.
That's what I'm going to do. By golly, I'm an American. I'm going to do it. All right. Well, that's all the time we've got for the show. I'm your host, YaDaddy, and I'd like to end the show with a simple but very important question. Are we going to be a free people? Dean, are we going to be a free people?
Let's stay a free people.
Absolutely. Join us next time on 2A Today, and we will help you answer that question. That's it. 2A Today. Over.